Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. I'm Elizabeth Lober. I'm with the USDA-Agricultural Marketing Service Commodity Procurement Program, and I have some of my colleagues with me that are going to join in and help me out with this presentation as we go along. Let me share my screen.
And Elizabeth, as you're doing that, I just want to quick turn it over to Kelsey Scott for a brief welcome from the Intertribal Agriculture Council.
Patuwash Day, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Our Executive Director, Carrie Jo, is currently en route on a work trip, so she's not able to join. She asked me to share her well wishes. We're all excited to learn together today. We really want to extend a warm thank you to our partners at AMS, the Office of Tribal Relations, really all of USDA as a whole, for bringing this really important and critical information to our stakeholders today. Without further ado, I'll turn it back over to you, Elizabeth.
Okay, great, thank you. And are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to start with was just to kind of give you a bigger picture overview of the way we're structured, and then we can get into the local food purchase assistance program. So to start out, we're part of the Agricultural Marketing Service, and within that, there are program areas. There's a transportation and marketing program, which administers most of our grant and cooperative agreements, and then I'm part of the commodity procurement program, which handles the USDA food purchases and is also handling the local food purchase assistance cooperative agreement program. So I wanted to start out, and I know this is a really busy slide, but we will share this deck in the chat, and you will have this information. But just to give you an idea, the transportation and marketing program administers various grant programs, which many of them are available to tribal governments. And so here I included a listing of them. There's 7 of them. I'm not going to go through them all now, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the breadth of the information or the programs that are available through the Agricultural Marketing Service, and give you a document that includes a brief description of each of these grants that's administered through the Transportation and Marketing Group. The Commodity Procurement Group handles the USDA Foods and the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, like I mentioned. And at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Andy Lang, who is going to talk about kind of an overview of the USDA purchase programs, and also talk about how interested parties can become a approved vendor.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm Andrea Lang. I am one of the new vendor coordinators. So today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about USDA food purchases with commodity procurement. So our mission at AMS Commodity Procurement is to facilitate the marketing of 100% US produced agricultural products through the purchase of food for domestic and international nutrition assistance programs. Basically, our goal is to feed the hungry in the US and around the world. So in partnership with the USDA's Food Nutrition Service, we purchase a variety of fresh and primarily processed products for distributions. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the products have to be 100% domestically sourced. So on the screen, you'll see a lot of information, but basically it is just a quick overview of how the competitive process works. So we do our purchases through bid invitations and government contracts. So that basically is what that says. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Andy.
That's okay.
I'm a little trigger happy.
No problem. Okay, so we purchase at commodity procurement over 4.5 million tons of American grown food in various forms and pack sizes. We purchase livestock, poultry, fruits, vegetables, dairy, grain, and oil seeds. As I said earlier, the purchases support American agriculture, and we're feeding for programs like the National School Lunch Program. We're feeding families through food banks and other qualified individuals through USDA's nutrition assistance and international food aid programs. The purchases that we make do have to be in commercial truckload quantities for delivery to destinations. So we need to make sure that our vendors have that capacity to meet those sufficient volumes. Next slide. So if you were interested in becoming a vendor with us, this is really just a breakdown of the process. So reviewing our master solicitation, which is the main body for our contracts, reviewing the product, I should say product specifications, but product specifications so that you can meet some of our technical aspects. Getting your administrative paperwork approved. So that would be working with Deanna and myself with all of the different company letters and information. Getting your technical portion completed, meaning you're meeting the audits and inspections that we require. Then once you are approved, you would be able to review the solicitation, getting all prepared, working on submitting your offer in our web-based supply chain management system. And then hopefully you would get awarded and deliver your product and then submit your invoice. So that's how that works in a nutshell. Next slide, please. So this is my favorite topic because this is what I do. This is my process, the administrative process. Deanna and I both work with vendors first one-on-one on these steps that are needed to become an approved vendor. So, and I will like to emphasize that this is just the first step. I mean, it really is like a two-step process where you have the administrative portion and then the technical portion. And so this administrative portion is what Deanna and I are responsible for, which is registering in System for Award Management, or SAM. We have our WebSCM vendor registration form, our company letter. We have 3 customer references that you must submit. We also request audited or reviewed financials, or if those cannot be provided, financial alternatives. If you are a non-manufacturer, then you will need to also supply supplier letters and a complaint and dispute resolution proposal. Next slide, please. Oh, keep clicking. Keep clicking. That must be from our webinar that we had earlier this week, but that was a very fun little fancy way of showing off that we are the points of contact. So Deanna, like I said, is my counterpart. She is responsible for fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts, and for international purchases, bulk commodities. I am responsible for dairy, grain, oil seeds, livestock, and poultry, and international purchases with packaged commodities. And that is our email, newvendor@usda.gov. Deanna and I are responsible for that. And I have to tell you, I'm in that inbox more so than my own personal inbox. So when you do reach out to us, you're getting a live person. You're not just getting some robot. So please feel free to contact us if you're interested in the USDA Foods Program. And we will have more to come on that. So it can be an extensive process. So please keep an eye out for future presentations and future information about that.
All right, thank you, Andy. So let's move to the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program. Like I started out saying, the USDA Foods Purchases is one part of what we do. The Local Food Purchase Assistance is a whole separate program. It's a cooperative agreement program that I'm gonna start out with a program overview. The program is a non-competitive cooperative agreement. It targets socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers for distribution to underserved communities. The program is authorized by the American Rescue Plan Act and has 3 overarching goals. The first is to strengthen local and regional food systems. The second is to support socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. And thirdly is to strengthen and broaden partnerships in underserved communities. So how's this cooperative agreement going to work? Well, there's two parts to it. There's the procurement part and the distribution part. The procurement part is where state and tribal governments procure domestic, local foods from local farmers and ranchers. These purchases are intended to target socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. And the other part of the procurement is that states and tribal governments need to follow their state laws, tribal laws and regulations when they do their procurements. The second part is the distribution, and that's where the food needs to go to or target underserved communities. The program funding, this program is for up to $400 million. It's for the 50 states, US territories, and federally recognized tribal governments. It's a 2-year program, so the agreements begin at when the agreement is signed. The program, it will last an additional 2 years. That way we hope we catch 2 growing seasons. We have provided a request for application, which we'll talk about a little bit more, the application process. But the allocation or the amount of money available to each state is determined through a TFAP funding formula, which looks at unemployment and poverty levels in states to determine the percentage that each state should receive. Eligible applicants, again, are state agencies, commissions, or departments that are responsible for procurement, and federally recognized tribal governments. Tribal governments that wish to work together are welcome to partner with other tribal governments. It's just one tribe will need to lead the submission and will need to submit the proposal. The program timeline, the request for applications was put out on December 6th. Applications are due on April 5th. Awards will be made as they are submitted, reviewed, and approved. So we're not going to wait until April 5th to start making awards. As we get applications and they come in and we've reviewed them, we'll start making awards. The cooperative agreements, like I said earlier, will be in place for 2 years. So I just wanted to hit on the application process at a high level here. The RFA was posted on grants.gov. In order to apply, you would need to submit your proposal through grants.gov, and we will also be using a system called EasyFed Grants. EasyFed Grants is the grant management system we're using. So applicants would also need to sign up for that program. The standard, so when they submit their application, they would submit a standard form 424, which is a fillable form, which is available on grants.gov, and the project narrative form, which we've included a template. They could add an extra 20 pages to that project narrative form template. In the proposal, they would include an executive summary, which is 250 words or less, that talks about the purpose of your program, expected outcomes, and it's something that we would be able to use publicly to talk about your program. As far as alignment and intent, that section, that's where you list your objectives, the objectives you hope to achieve through the program, and who the beneficiaries of your program would be. The narrative requires a work plan. The work plan includes a section on planning resources, financial controls, reporting ability, risk management plans, and a timeline and milestones. There are up to 4 outcomes for the program. These are your goals, what you'd like to achieve. The first one is around the purchases, and that's where you would provide the number of farmers or ranchers you intend to purchase from, and of those, what percentage or what number of them would be socially disadvantaged. And the second outcome is around the distribution. So again, it's the number of locations for distribution, and of those locations, how many of them are reaching underserved communities. The third outcome is about the marketing channels that are created through this program. So this is the new relationships that are formed and maintaining those over after the program is over, because obviously it's a 2-year program. We'd like these marketing opportunities to continue after the 2 years. And the fourth outcome is available if you have your own goals that you'd like to achieve. That's where you can include them in the project narrative. Indirect costs are provided for by this program. So applicants may request indirect costs for a de minimis up to 10% or for their negotiated indirect cost agreement rate if they have one of those agreements in place. Applicants may also request direct cost for things such as storage and distribution and administrative expenses. The reporting requirements, there will be quarterly and annual reports required for this program. Recipients are required to provide quarterly reports that give information on their procurements and also on their distributions. The same thing with annual reports. The annual reports will be an accumulation of the quarterly reports, but they will also include information on those new marketing opportunities and the new distribution channels that have been created. The single audit requirement, this is a federal requirement for grants or cooperative agreements in which over $750,000 of federal funding is spent in a fiscal year. This requires the recipient to provide a single audit, an audit which evaluates the operation and internal controls and requires financial statements. The contacts and resources for this program, we have created an outreach resource page, and on this page we have resources for states and tribes and resources for socially disadvantaged producers. For states and tribes, we've included some vendors that have participated in USDA programs, either in the Farmers to Families Food Box program or in the TFAP Fresh Produce program. And for resources for socially disadvantaged producers, we included information on technical resources that are available through the 2501 grant program. In addition, states have included their contact, in some cases have included their contact information. So if potential producers are interested in the program, they can contact the state using that information. We will make this opportunity available also to tribal governments. So if a tribal government would like to share their information in order to help with formulating their plan, please send us or put information in the chat on the information that you would like us to post on the website. Then that information will be available to anyone that's looking to participate in your area. I didn't mention too, we have a website that has all this information available. We've taken our team and divided them into regions so that there's a specific contact available for each state based on a region. Again, I know this is a little bit small, but we'll be sharing this deck, and everyone's welcome to contact these points of contact directly. And again, for more information, we have a website, an LFPA website, and we also have an LFPA inbox, lfpa@usda.gov, that you can send questions into. So I think, Dan, with that, that's my presentation. I think at this point, we're going to turn it back over to you. And I think you had some examples you wanted to share.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Did you have those slides in here, or do you want me to pull up my slides?
Why don't you pull up your slides?
Okay, great. If you want to stop a screen share, and as I'm working on pulling up some of my slides, I just want to give some context and some background of this is a great opportunity. And I think I just want to emphasize that, the eligible applicants for this program, as has been covered, are state and tribal governments. And so, for our tribal producers who are on, it's going to be really important for either for your tribal government to apply for this funding, or, or respective state governments. But then I think the opportunity is, this is going to be really a huge opportunity for sales for our producers. And so I'm going to share just an example of a pilot project that we have been doing in my region. I cover the Great Lakes region for the Intertribal Agriculture Council. And we started a tribal elder food box last year. And just for some background and context, now these are some of our partners for the first year. We were working really kind of somewhat in response to the pandemic of, I think a lot of people remember that when the pandemic first first happened, we went to lockdown, go to the grocery store, and there wouldn't be any toilet paper on the shelves. Food in a lot of places was kind of scarce. People were buying a lot of food. And we've had actually a lot of supply chain disruptions throughout the pandemic. But in response, Congress had passed the CARES Act, and there's the USDA food box program, and there were truckloads of food that was coming in. For a lot of the tribal partners that I work with, I think there's an appreciation to be getting that food, but there was also kind of a little bit of a I wouldn't say hesitation, but there are truckloads of milk and yogurt that's coming in, and a lot of our tribal community members are lactose intolerant. And I know one of the tribes that there's a reference to pandemic chicken, that there's just so much of the frozen chicken that was coming in that it took on its own name of pandemic chicken. So there's an appreciation for that food, but there was also really, it got us thinking and talking, what would a program look like if we could run it ourselves? And we ended up, through some discussions, put a grant into Feeding America in partnership with Feeding Wisconsin, and received funding for a $428,000 pilot program for a tribal elder food box. We started with 3 tribes of Menominee, Oneida, and Redcliffe. We're able to expand to 7 in the first year, and really had that flexibility of basically, if we had producers that could do enough product, we could buy it. And we had 900 boxes that we put out every other week for a total of 10,800 boxes. 86% of that funding went to food purchases, and 41% of those food purchases were from tribal producers. We put the priority first on buying from our tribal producers, and then we need more products, so we then went outside of our tribal producers and really worked with a lot of other socially disadvantaged producers. A lot of mung growers from the Eau Claire area in Wisconsin were able to get fresh produce in. And I know some of the feedback that we got from them is that they really historically been excluded from federal, from USDA purchases from a variety of different factors, but this was one of the first times that any of these programs actually came back to benefit them. So that was part of why we wanted to share this example of this tribal elder food box. And again, I want to be clear, this was a separate program, but it may give some ideas and spark some thought on how this local food purchase assistance program may work for your communities and in your respective regions. So here's just a map for the pilot of the participating tribes, and the tribes, and then the producers, and the indigenous producers, local producers, and some of our partners. We're in the process right now of looking at how do we continue this project for the second year. But one of the things is we did do a survey of participants, and just some highlights. Now, one of our limitations with this pilot program is that the funding needed to go to perishable items. We were able to raise some separate funds to do wild rice and maple syrup, but the response from the recipients was they really liked the lettuce. We had actually an aquaponic lettuce from Forest County Potawatomi's farm that was a big hit. The apple, sweet corn, the fruit and berries really went over well. And then the proteins, we had Lake Superior whitefish, buffalo, elk at different times, and ground beef, stew beef. So a lot of great products, and then a request for more of the fruits, berries, herbs, and so this was, really trying to be responsive and trying to put boxes together that our elders and our tribal community members really, for foods that they wanted to see and wanted to eat, and then also looked at, was the quantity enough? On a previous slide, we were at around $40 per box and around 25 pounds on average per box, and seemed like it was a pretty good amount. A little bit much for some, but then we also had an indication that the recipients were sharing with members of their family. So for this next year, we've been able to secure at this point $1 million of ARPA funds from the state of Wisconsin, and we're looking to expand to 1,300 to 1,400 boxes. And we're in the process now of expanding on discussions with other tribes and expanding this pilot. And part of the connection to this LFPA is we're looking at the LFPA as a possible funding mechanism to keep this pilot going beyond 2022 into 2023 and hopefully into 2024. So again, wanted to share this example to help to maybe to get the gears turning and thinking about how could this work with your tribes and in your regions. And I'll say there's no way that we would have been able to get that pilot project going without substantial partnership. And Feeding Wisconsin was a key partner. Feeding Wisconsin Eastern Region, we had a purchasing manager that really helped to coordinate the contact with the vendors and all the detail of how much is coming in. And it's complicated. And then with Intertribal Ag Council and some of our connections with tribal producers, we really tried to do the outreach. And I think 41% was a good number, but our goal is we'd like to see that number rise of how much of the tribal product is going in. I also mentioned we partnered with the Wisconsin Food Hub Cooperative. Having that warehouse, that aggregation site, and the transportation was key. So I think a big takeaway is partnerships are really helpful to make these efforts work. And again, as an example, that's a regional project, and I'm going to put my email into the chat box. I'm happy to talk more with anyone on here of if you may have questions on how that effort worked, or even may have product that you would be interested for that pilot. But of course, really thinking about how can this connect, how can this local food purchase assistance program connect into supporting you and your communities. I see we do have a few questions in the chat box. So Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it back over to you if we wanted to start to go through some of those questions.
Sure. And I'm sort of a slow reader here. So there's a question about the products that can be used in this program, and they can be fresh or processed products. The big requirement is that they're local, and also that they're domestic. So those in the RFA, it talks about the definition of local, but it's within the state or territory or within 400 miles. As far as domestic, there's also the information about ingredients being domestic, but as long as the ingredients are domestic and local, it will work whether it's processed or fresh. And let's see. yeah, then there's a question about natural, organic. And again, that's up to the participants. That's up to the tribal governments, how they want to fashion their program, if they want to purchase organic products or not organic products. That we're leaving that. There's a lot of leeway up to the recipients on how they structure their program. Let's see. Okay. And there's a question about advance payments here. We can give up to 3 months worth of advance payment at a time. So if a tribal government or a recipient was granted $2 million, so it'd be $100 million a year, we could give up to $250,000 a quarter, which is a reporting period. We can't expend more than what can be used pretty quickly. And so we couldn't do more than what can be done in a reporting period, and a reporting period is 3 months. So that was a question. And there's a question about farm to raise elk and bison, and they sure would qualify as long as they're local.
Elizabeth, I can help to off the questions too. I know it's kind of difficult to multitask if you're reading and answering. So I'll read this question of is local definition within 400 miles within a state, or is it 400 miles or within a state, regardless of distance?
It's within the state or within 400 miles. So it can be, I live in West Virginia. The food may come from Maryland, it might come from Pennsylvania, it might come from Virginia, as long as it's within 400 miles, or it could come from anywhere in the state of West Virginia.
Okay, I'll ask the next question then. Can food grown by a tribe's farm or garden be purchased by the same tribe's nutritional assistance program?
And I guess that's one we probably need a little bit more detail. That might be one that if you can send us more detail about how the purchase would be made, how the organizations are set up. I think the answer is yes, but I'd like to just know a little bit more how the organization's set up, because it does need to be a purchase.
Generally speaking, though, a tribe would be able to purchase from its local producers, or which could be, if you have a tribal program that is a producer, the tribe would be able to purchase from that program.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm scrolling ahead. Is that a 400-mile radius from the reservation, because they are located on the edge of their state and have farmers within 400 miles?
Yes, it's 400 miles from where the food is being utilized.
Here's a good question. 400 aerial miles. I think yes, it would be not 400 miles on a road. It's 400 miles,
right.
by distance. And then here's a good question. Who pays the vendors? Do the tribes pay the vendors?
Right. Yeah. So the tribes have the agreement. We give the money to the tribes pay the vendors. And the tribes handle the distribution, however that occurs.
I'm just looking through our questions here. I did see one of, are you able to purchase USDA approved locally farmed elk and bison meat?
And yes.
Are you able to purchase non-USDA approved locally farmed elk and bison meat?
We did not include any of the food safety requirements in our RFA. We're leaving that up to the states and the tribal governments to handle their food safety requirements. I do want to mention, like I mentioned during the webinar, that you are required to follow your state and tribal laws, procurement laws. So we get this question, it depends what your state and tribal laws are, but we're not dictating what food safety requirements you follow.
So, I think that's really one of what I think is one of the most exciting things about this program is that it's really giving that control to the tribe to decide of how they want to make this work. I'm seeing another from earlier in the session of for those in the Pacific Northwest, the Yakima Nation has purchased a 1,500 acre produce farm, and it's able to be a distributor. That's really, that's part of the intention with this webinar. The key requirement here is that the tribal governments are going to need to apply, or you could possibly work with your state government, but we need to be building out the list of the products, the producers, the distributors, all key components to making this work. So I know it's a little bit complicated in practice to make it work. So that's a great piece of information there. I will also say, I want to type into the chat box that Intertribal Ag Council, our American Indian Foods Program, the website for our foods program is indianagfoods.org. And on that website, there's a producer directory. If you're on this webinar or listening on Facebook Live, and if you're not on that directory and would like to be, please make sure to get in contact with our program staff. The foods program also administers the no cost Made by American Indians trademark. So that's a great resource. And I know that we're really going to be leaning pretty heavily on our foods program to help to make connections, help tribes make connections with more producers to be able to make this work. And I think it's a exciting part of this effort is, I can say, and part of why we shared that example with the tribal elder food box is the level of coordination to make that pilot project work. It really is substantial. But these type of efforts, you're going to have to get a lot of that coordination. And I think the long-term hope is that it's going to result in new partnerships, expanded networks that'll create more opportunity for producers and address food security issues for tribes as we move forward. We have another question. Can a tribal farm that is not USDA approved pay for their produce to be sold as long as the tribal government agrees and it's in compliance with state laws?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I totally understand that question, but if the question is, I don't know, as long as the product complies with the requirements that the tribe has for food safety and that those requirements are within their state or tribal laws, then it's fine. We're not imposing additional regulation, but they do need to follow their state and tribal laws.
Okay. And sorry, I think we have, there's a question in the Q&A. Sorry, we've got a couple of different boxes here. I'm just navigating over to that one. So on the LFPA, what are the grant amounts for tribes? You mentioned TFAP for states. How do we determine the funding allowance for tribes? That's a very good question.
That is a good question. Okay, so we have a dollar amount for each state, and that is intended to provide funding for the state and tribal governments that apply within that state. So in the case where state governments, and we don't know who's going to apply, we don't know, the state governments are all going to apply or not apply, or some will, and same thing with the tribal government. So if a state applies and there's tribal governments within that state, we're not going to give them more than 60% of that dollar amount until after the deadline to apply, so we can see what interest there is from tribal governments in those states. And then we will look at the objectives that are in the project narrative, the number of people served, and some other factors to determine how to divide that money up between the state governments and the tribal governments.
And so I just pulled up, if you go to the program website, this is the request for applications, and there's this table that I know this is just an estimate at this point, but this is the estimated allocation, correct, Elizabeth? For that state.
Right, and like I said, this is based on the TFAP funding formula, which is derived from unemployment levels and poverty levels in each state.
And I can say one of the states that I'm in my region that we're working with, they're working right now on their application and are trying to account for how to support tribes. And one of the ideas that is being explored is that they would stipulate that 40%, in case tribes don't apply, that they're just putting 40% of their application to tribal governments if tribes don't apply. Now, and our concern is we want tribes to apply directly, but I know that's how one of the states that I work with is even looking at this and trying to make sure that at least they're accounting for how to partner with tribes within their application. And I realize that is one of the more complex components of this brand new program.
Right, and we have heard from several states that said they are working with the tribal governments to work together on the program. So it'll be one application probably coming from the state government, but they have built into their application the work that they're going to do with the tribal governments.
Yeah. Here's another really good question from the question and answer. Would a tribal nonprofit be able to apply as an umbrella group for tribes it's chartered under?
Yeah.
Looking at the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and this is a really good question, and I think we may even need to look a little bit closer at it into the future, because the commission is actually has tribes from 3 states. So would the commission be able to apply? Would each of the states apply, or would each of the tribes apply?
The tribes would need to apply. This is for states and federally recognized tribal governments.
And just, we've had some discussion on this because we're actually looking at the possibility of an intertribal consortium. And it's my understanding, Elizabeth, that under that model, that could work in a couple of different ways. You could either have each of the tribes apply individually as part of the consortium, or possibly you may be able to have one tribe apply on behalf of the consortium with other tribes, and other tribes could, for instance, provide a resolution that they would be partnering as part of this consortium, but it's going to need to be one of those tribes applying. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I think if there's going to be, if folks have questions on, on that type of a scenario, I think one of the exciting things that we'd like to share is that USDA and the program staff are going to be available for work session office hours every Thursday afternoon as we move forward, and while this program is open. Elizabeth, do you want to share any more information on that?
Yeah, so we are going to have office hours from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday afternoon. And during that time, you could come and bring your questions. We've been doing it with state governments. It's a great time to share across tribes, and to have dialogue about the program and how it's going to work for you. So we hope you'll participate in that. In addition, we have our direct contacts that you can contact, and we also have the LFPA inbox, but the office hours are really a good time to just discuss what you're thinking about doing and to have a good open discussion. So we're looking forward to that. So that'll be 2 to 3 Eastern time on Thursdays.
I can also just add too, I know that within Great Lakes region, one of the things we're looking at is, as part of this intertribal consortium or cooperative, is just to be able to provide more of that logistical support that tribes who want to participate, that we can at least help to make the connection with the vendors, with the producers, and just look at where there are opportunities for cooperating with one another on the transportation, the distribution. I think it's to me, it's one of the really exciting things about this program. Okay, we have another question of, we are looking to purchase live cattle and then have them slaughtered at a USDA approved facility and then selling ground beef at a discount to tribal members. Is this allowable?
No, but there might, hopefully you can find a way to purchase the ground beef directly. And that would be allowable, but we're not purchasing livestock through this program. So it's only going to be for raw or processed foods. Livestock isn't included in as an eligible product.
And maybe let's reframe that in this scenario a bit. Now, if you had a tribe or a couple of different tribes that had that have funding under this program, and then let's say you had either a company or a group of cattle producers that would come together and coordinate that processing and have a finished product. Those tribes would be able to then buy from those producers, would be my understanding.
That's right. That's right, Dan. Yeah. So there's a way to make it work. It just needs to be already processed when it's purchased.
Yeah. So I think that this program, it really it's going to take a little bit of creativity to think of how to make it work. I'll just mention now too, I know that USDA Rural Development fairly soon should be opening up the value added producer grant, and IC has worked closely with USDA Rural Development for over a decade on that program. And this is kind of where all of that background work is important, that we have the finished product. I will say, I don't know if we have folks from Red Cliff on the webinar today, but we worked pretty close with Red Cliff over the years. They used one of those value-added producer grants for doing a feasibility study that really laid the foundation for them to raise that, that said, yeah, this would work. They used it to raise the capital, built that facility. They opened it. Last fall of 2020, and the Red Cliff Fish Company has been a major supplier for that elder food box that I talked about, and then another related effort for the food distribution program on Indian reservations, the FIDIPR or COMMOD program. There's a authority there of a 638 self-governance authority that the Red Cliff Fish Company also has sold product to their own tribe and a couple of other tribes as part of that effort too. So, just kind of thinking about how does all of this connect back together, that value-added producer grant's a great opportunity. So definitely keep that one in mind, and there should be more information on that in the near future. I'm just going to check our chat box here. We're getting close to time. Another very good question. Is this demonstration project is this program going to be extended after 2024, and is funding going to be provided moving forward?
Yeah, and I can't answer the question about the funding after 2024. I think it's going to depend how successful it is, and what the needs are at that time. So I can't really answer that. What was the second part of the question, Dan?
Is there going to be funding moving forward?
Yeah, no, and I don't know.
So
It's kind
I'll
of
add a
just
little bit
under-
more context on that. I mentioned there's the FDIP, or the Food Distribution Program, the 638 Authority. That's a totally separate program than this, but that one was created as part of the 2018 Farm Bill. And I know that Intertribal Ag Council is advocating for continued and expanded funding for these types of authorities that give more control to our tribes in terms of purchasing. And related to that, the Native Farm Bill Coalition is an effort led by IAC, Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative, and other partners with support from Shakopee. Native Farm Bill Coalition has just been kicking off over the past couple of months, and I think is a great opportunity to really identify. We'd like to see these type of programs continue. They're important for helping our producers and addressing food security in our tribal communities. So Native Farm Bill Coalition, if folks are interested, please check it out. I know there's a weekly or regular webinars on the different titles of that. Lexi Holden is the Associate Director for Policy for Intertribal Ag Council. So Lexi would be able to provide more information, and I'll put her email into the chat box as well. Elizabeth, a good question for you. What percentage of the total award should be going toward procurement versus administrative costs? Very good question.
Yeah, and like we said, we want the predominance of the funds to be used to purchase food. I mean, that's the whole gist of the program. But I did see there was a question about increasing staff as a direct expense, and sure, that is an acceptable direct expense, is staffing. So we want the predominance of the funds to be used for food purchases. However, staffing, transportation, things like that are allowable direct expenses. And when you look at the project narrative, it has places to include that information on those other direct expenses that you may have. It's a non-competitive program, so we're not comparing one to another when making our decisions on who gets them. But obviously, the more people served, the more we're meeting our goals of the program. So we left that open because in some places there are a lot more hurdles to distribution and a lot more expense involved in distribution. And in some places there's a lot more expense in purchasing the commodities and the availability of commodities. So we're leaving that pretty open. However, our goal was to purchase and distribute as much food as possible.
Great. And then a couple more questions along the lines of the bike and the bison and the elk. Would locally caught salmon by local tribal fishers be acceptable?
Yes. Again, it needs to be processed.
Yeah.
but yes.
Yeah. And then back for CRITFIC, that CRITFIC is legally recognized as a tribal government. I think we're going to have some more questions on those type of intergovernmental tribal groups. So maybe we can follow up with that offline, and can also have an opportunity to talk further in the office hours on Thursdays, because I think there may be some unique circumstances that will be kind of dependent on each scenario. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, this program is available for federally recognized tribal governments.
Yeah. A kind of a related question: can a tribe partner with a non-tribal group for distribution?
And the answer to that is yes.
And so just to reiterate, a weekly Zoom link, we will have that available. Both that we'll do a follow-up email for folks registered for this, and we'll have that information available on the IEC website. So we'll make sure that to try to make sure that the weekly Zoom meeting link is widely available.
Yeah, actually, David Munford on our team put it in the chat. And also, I believe he put the link to our frequently asked questions in the chat. So we are constantly up every week. I think we're updating our frequently asked questions. So that's another great place to get information.
And then marketing enhancement is a component. What percentage is suggested to forecast for cost?
So I think that's just, up to your group to explain what you're going to do and why you're going to do it and how much it's going to cost. And then we can look at that, when we review the proposals. Again, this is a cooperative agreement. This isn't a competitive grant. So when we receive proposals, if there's areas that we're concerned about, we're going to work together on it and we're going to talk to you about it. So, we're hopeful that, we're going to form somewhat of a partnership as we work through these as cooperative agreements.
Well, we're just about at time. I want to thank I want to thank our program staff from USDA Ag Marketing Service. This is a brand new program, and usually it takes new programs a little bit more time to get rolled out. So Elizabeth, I just want to thank you and your team for joining us today and helping to answer some of these questions. And then please, everybody, remember the weekly office hours with program staff, I think, are going to be fairly helpful. I know that the states have had quite a few questions, and the states have probably had a little bit more experience with the TFAP program of running this type of operation. So both USDA, AMS, but IEC is also here to help our tribes and producers help to navigate this new program. I will say, I typed it in the chat box, but the recording from this webinar is going to be available on the IEC YouTube channel, and it's also available, it should be available right now on IEC's Facebook from the live stream, and we'll work to get the slides emailed out, and we'll try to get them posted on the IEC website as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say, we did post the slides also in the chat.
Okay, yeah, and the slides will be in the chat there too. So quick download them if you haven't already. And thank you, everybody. I know there's probably going to be more questions as folks are working on applications. So both IEC and AMS will be here to help as much as we can. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.